Greetings, friends, and welcome to Tim Kirby Russia, where I, veteran talk show host and political analyst Tim Kirby, tell you about current events, geopolitics, and much more from an insider Russian perspective. Today we're talking about Ukraine because the Secretary of Defense took a little visit to Kiev, which made big waves within Russia. Our guest today is Leonid Savin, who's going to tell us all about the ramifications of this big visit. That's coming up very soon, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But for now, let me try to break down why the Ukraine is such a big topic within Russia. Now, before we talk about the Ukraine, I want to talk for a moment about Cyprus. I've spent some time there. My daughter has some pretty horrible allergies, so we've tried to dodge the allergy season in Russia by going to Cyprus. Now, there's a little town not very far away from Larnaca in the south where we stayed. And there's this lovely school there, pretty big, international school, so I guess they teach in English or something. But anyways, on the one side of the school, they have this sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, happy propaganda where there's like a kid that's blowing bubbles, and each one of the bubbles turns into like the flag of some country. And you can see that they sort of conspicuously put certain nations like Russia and Ukraine, Palestine, Israel, although Palestine is not considered a nation by some, but you know what I mean. I don't know who else is in conflict. North and South Korea, sort of those bubbles near each other, kind of like a hint about how we can all get along. And that seems all kind of well and good. And from a Cypriot or a Greek perspective, I'm sure the conflict in North and South Korea looks pretty easy to resolve. But when we go to the other side of the school building, there's this giant mural that's a map of Cyprus. And on the top part of the map, there's a bloody Turkish boot stomping the life out of the island. Because we can't forget that during the 70s, essentially, although Cyprus looks to many like an independent island nation, the south part of Cyprus sees itself as an inherent, inalienable part of Greece that's been torn away due to UN bureaucracy creating this sort of island state because a lot of the north was invaded, in their opinion, by the Turks and taken over. So you can see that how there's this sort of dissonance where, on the one hand, for these sort of foreign issues that the local people don't really understand, it seems like it'd be so easy to just get over it. Come on, Israeli Jews and Palestinians, just forget about it, live in peace, right? But on the other side of the building, when it's their conflict, when it's their deep-seated ethnic issue, oh boy, it's a bloody Turkish boot stomping the island. And that's kind of the situation here with Russia and Ukraine. Is I'm sure from far away, this might be the most insane conflict there is on the planet. Because if we look at the whole Serbia-Kosovo, right, it's a difference of religion. If we look at Israel-Palestine, it's a lot of religious control of the Holy Land. North and South Korea, two vastly different systems that would like to control the entire Korean peninsula. But when you look at Russia and Ukraine, it's kind of same religion, both Slavic. A lot of Russian people consider Ukrainian to be more of a dialect of Russian than a separate language. It's sort of proof about the level of tribalism in humanity that you can get two groups of people who are almost identical, who may even be part of one group of people from the perspective of Moscow, to fight each other to the death. So quite a unique conflict in that sense. Now, and that's part of the reason also why this is so important, because from a Moscow perspective, the fact that Belarus and Ukraine are not connected to Mother Russia, for them is insane. These seem to be, from a Russian perspective, this would be like dividing America between like the West, the North, and the South. You know what I mean? It would be just madness to divide the country like that. But it did happen, and it's a massive tragedy. The other aspect of the tragedy is how a lot of Nazi rehabilitation, neo-Nazi symbolism, and all this other stuff has been used by the Kiev forces to sort of almost reinvigorate the spirit of World War II. And obviously for Russians, that has been well noticed. So again, another sort of interesting bit about perspective is that all the time, you know, people from outside of Russia, they think that the problems in Russia are the ones that the Western news media reports. So they'll always talk about, well, some journalist was jailed for something. First off, they don't even know which journalists, who, over what, were they jailed, were these journalists even in existence? They don't care. So it's usually some sort of like democracy, human rights, this, that, or the other. That is never actually the issue in Russia. I can tell you the two things that have affected Putin's popularity rating that he will never be able to repair. Well, he might be able to repair them, but for the foreseeable future, it's not happening. Number one, the state pension reforms. Raising the pension age by 5 years was insanely unpopular, especially when Putin promised, I think 12 or 15 years ago, that would never happen. That really hurt his popularity ratings. The second event was the botched handling of the situation in Ukraine, the Maidan Revolution. Many people within Russia feel that was a winnable event from a Russian standpoint, and Russia lost. Yes, Russia got the Crimea. Perhaps Russia's going to get a chunk of the Donbass, but 85% of the rest of the heartland of Russia is going to probably be swallowed up by NATO. But anyways, right now we're going to talk to Leonid Savin about this Ukrainian situation, and especially the big visit from the Secretary of Defense of the United States to Kiev to talk to President Zelensky about many different things, some of which could hopefully not lead to World War III. Okay, so let's start out with the big one. Why is Mr. Austin's visit to Kiev so big? This was all over the Russian news. Why is it so important?
For Russia, it's kind of something new, because before Defense Secretary of United States never launched visit to the Ukraine. But from the point of view of general strategy of United States, it's normal. Because in the documents of defense strategy of United States, we see that Russia and China, also Iran and North Korea, market like treats to United States. And recent visits of Lloyd Austin, Defense Secretary of United States, to Middle East countries, to the South Asia region, and in Europe, it's just kind of routine procedure, just to organize new deals with neighboring countries of Russia and China and Iran. And so it's a kind of practical strategy of United States, just to engage more vassal states into our strategy.
Okay, so the Department of Defense wants to engage the vassal states, as you put it. So what does that mean? How do they want to engage them? Get them to do what?
To be like a small power and work for the interest of the United States. Of course, it's framed like defense of democracy, like promotion of the similar human rights values and so on. But in reality, it's just service for United States in Europe, in Asia, and in Middle East region. Because idea fix of Eurasia. And many American authors, Spikeman and Zbigniew Brzezinski, told about importance to control Eurasia. And the most powerful country in Eurasia is Russia. So it's obvious. United States would like to create zones of instability in Europe, in Middle East, in Balkans, and everywhere, just to organize hot points.
Okay, well, if you're saying that it's an obvious ploy by Washington to break up the Eurasian space, well, why wasn't Russia thinking about that in 2014 when they basically just let Washington have the overwhelming majority of the territory of the Ukraine?
It was coup organized by United States with support of European Union, and for Russia it was very difficult to bring our strategy in Ukraine. We cooperated with legal government of Viktor Yanukovych, but there was serious problem, and the kind of installed activists and NGOs inside of Ukraine promoted Western values and Russophobic position inside of Ukraine. So in practice it was small groups, but they united and organized Maidan in Kiev, and with huge support, financial support, technical support, diplomatic support. It's very important. From the West, they won this war during crisis in Ukraine. at the end of 2013 and finally in 2014.
Speaking of war, the war in the Donbass continues to rage on. Now, the thing is that Kiev says openly that the reason the war continues to go on is because of the Russian invasion that happened. That essentially they're fighting Russia, and so that's why it's so difficult. Now, if a Russian invasion didn't happen, that means that they're just simply unable to beat a small group of rebels with very limited resources, which is kind of pathetic. So, which is it? Russian invasion or a complete inability to fight rebels?
Of course, Russia never invaded Ukraine, and it was a process defragmentation of the Ukrainian statehood started from the coup. Just need to remember what happened in Odessa when more than 100 people was burned alive, and because police just doing nothing, and Ukrainian neo-Nazi group attacked Russians in different regions in Ukraine, in western Ukraine, in central part of Ukraine. It was kind of start of very massive repressions, and in southeast part of Ukraine, many groups united just to organize self-defense, and they still succeed, and we see independent republic of Lugansk and Donbass, and they try to organize self-defense and self-governance and separated from Ukraine, because they would not like have the same fate like people in Odessa.
By Odessa, he means anti-Maidan activists who were burnt alive by neo-Nazis on May 2nd, 2014 in the House of Unions building in Odessa. Now, recently, the Russian media made it very clear that people in the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics are now overwhelmingly getting Russian citizenship. They're also getting their SNILS number, which is kind of like a Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid sort of number, so they can get a pension and get taken care of. Now, because this is sort of looks like basically integration into Russia, does that mean if Kiev were to launch a massive attack on the Donbass, would it essentially be an attack on Russia itself?
In general, Ukrainian policy on Donbass territory is very slow attacks and adopting this enclaves and this border land into own Ukrainian land. Their strategy for adaptation officially it not work, so they just used military power and to start gunfire and to attack militia in Donbass region, etc. But of course, there is a humanitarian question where people from Donbass will get medical assistance, how they get any kind of support, because it's they marginalized from Ukrainian side and also from European, from Western side. So Russia provided humanitarian assistance, not only like some shipments, but also this idea to bring some document that may be useful in Russia.
Okay, we've kind of talked about why Kiev just hasn't gone in and taken the Donbass back, or the Crimea for that matter. But the question is, if Kiev is so poor and so weak, they're not a part of NATO, why hasn't Russia just gone in and taken the big piece of the pie for themselves? I mean, to be honest, if there was a real open war between Ukrainian and Russian forces, half the Ukrainian forces would either desert or turn traitor within 24 hours.
I think it's very easy just to start military campaign from Russian side, especially in 2014, and just to catch Kiev and Lvov and whole Ukraine. But again, there is humanitarian question, because first of all, neo-Nazi Ukrainian groups are very aggressive, so they may to kill innocent people also inside of Ukraine, just who speak Russians. Until now, we see huge repressions from the state and for the Russians who lives in Ukraine. Second, of course, Russia would like to start peace building process, like we assist in many regions in between Armenia and Azerbaijan, for example, Karabakh issue in Syria. Yes, we can use military power and we can do it very quickly. But we need to remember that Ukraine is organic part of Russian world, and most of Ukrainian peoples are Russians. Politically, they have Ukrainian passports, and some of them have another type of ideas, mostly kind of zombified by ideas of Ukrainian nationalism, where Russia is enemy, eternal enemy of Ukrainian nation that never existed before. So I think it was mostly humanitarian point of view of Russian leadership not start military campaign against Ukraine after the coup.
Well, was that bit of Kremlin logic correct in your opinion?
Now, for my opinion, I think we may use military power, and just you maybe you remember that after conflict in Georgia, where were attempts to attack on Ossetia and Abkhazia, we launched new strategy of national security, and there was very clear pointed that Russia may use military power to protect our own people. So even from this point of view, we can use huge military power just to protect one Russian citizen anywhere.
One thing, why can't Russia use soft power? I mean, the US State Department was able to spend a handful of billions to buy the entirety of the Ukraine. Why can't Russia do the same thing?
I think it's not possible because soft power not exist in Russia. Many think about it that yes, Ruski Mir, Russian world, and many NGOs and activity of Ministry of Foreign Affairs to promote new initiative that is presented like Russian soft power. But soft power originally born in United States, and they're totally different political system. They're totally different strategic culture. They invested billions for the decades, and Russia not. During the Soviet time, yes, we can speak about kind of soft power, idea of Marxism, etc. But in contemporary Russia, soft power not exist, to be honest.
Since the beginning of the Maidan conflict, we've all heard about these private battalions, essentially private armies of mercenaries being financed by the Ukrainian oligarchy, including a Mr. Kolomoisky. So, if these guys are really doing the effective fighting, why hasn't Russia focused its attention, its sort of secret service, special forces attention on the Ukrainian oligarchy?
Exactly. Azov Group was supported financially by Mr. Kolomoisky and some other oligarchs. For example, Levachkin, who worked in administration of president during the president time of Mr. Yanukovych. He played double game, provided some financial support to Party of Regions of Yanukovych and provided some financial support to Party Svoboda, Freedom, of neo-Nazi party of Oleg Tyagnikbok. So there still exist real powerful moguls in Ukraine, and of course it's not question of special forces, Russian special forces, because Russia not doing similar types of operations like do it CIA. We have another types of experience, we have another type of approach to politics, so we prefer negotiation process, not war.
Well, hypothetically, wouldn't it be possible to negotiate with someone like Kolomoisky?
Yes, and actually there are some proxy activists and how to say mediators, and we can to contact Kolomoisky and other oligarchs and even some leaders of neo-Nazi groups, not directly, but via some mediators in European countries, for example.
From the way you're talking, it seems like money is the only real issue. So why doesn't Russia just put a lot of money on the table? I mean, isn't it Russian way to bribe your way out of situation?
Not Russia, not doing such kind of policy. I don't know why. It's during my visit in many countries, some experienced persons told me that, for example, if Russia would like win in front of American policy in our country, you just need to pay on the table more to politicians here in this country, because Americans do it everywhere. and very successfully. But Russia not doing such kind of politics.
Well, predicting the future is always by far the hardest question. So, Mr. Savin, what do you think the Ukrainian situation will look like in 5 years' time?
It's very difficult to predict, for example, for 10 years and even for 5 years. I think it will be kind of stagnation in Ukrainian questions, because European countries not support Ukraine anymore like before. It's mostly kind of rhetoric, just okay, let's to support democracy process in Ukraine, let's to continue sanctions against Russia. But politicians they understand that problems not start from Russian-Ukrainian conflict, it start from abroad, because United States organized this cup. Of course, Russia will continue our policy, and I think that Donbass will be incorporated into Russia later or sooner. Don't know when exactly, in 5 years and 10 years, but process going into this direction.